The Walking Dead has finally returned from its mid-season break and followed through with its big shocker from last year's finale. Carl Grimes is dead, bitten by a walker. The episode largely belongs to Riggs, along with Andrew Lincoln's Rick and Denai Guerrera's Michonne, with the three landing some of the biggest emotional beats we've ever seen on The Walking Dead, and Riggs doing work he's often looked incapable of. But that's not enough to justify killing him off. Carl is, or rather was, one of the few original survivors, a character fans have been following through the rare good times and the more typically bad ones for 8 years now. And to kill him off at this stage, with the show still likely to run for at least a couple more years, feels like a complete misstep. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is The Walking Dead: 7 Reasons Why Carl's Death Was a Huge Mistake. Number 7. It repeats one of the show's worst habits. It's long been a common thought that anyone can die on The Walking Dead, and throughout the show's run, it's often been proved true, as key characters like Dale, Herschel, Tyrese, T-Dog, and Glenn have all bitten the dust, or just been bitten themselves. One of the problems with the show's approach to death, though, is that it's often done purely for the sake of shocking viewers rather than serving the plot and its characters. We've seen it happen with the likes of Andrea and Beth, and while the show's shock value used to be high, it has dwindled after so many fake-outs and the Negan cliffhanger. This is a repeat of their tendency to try and leave viewers shook. Carl is such an important figure, and one considered so completely bulletproof, that it's hard to see any other cause for the death other than to prove to its declining fanbase that they can still upset and that no one is safe. Number 6. Another dragged-out death. Along with the shock factor, The Walking Dead has always had an annoying habit of dragging out deaths, or potential deaths, across either long gaps between airing or across multiple episodes themselves. It happened most notably with the Glenn fake-out, then the actual deaths of Glenn and Abraham, and, in Season 8, the question of what was happening with Gabriel and Negan. The same has now happened with Carl, with the reveal he'd been bitten coming in the mid-season finale, but the actual death not happening until a few months later in the mid-season premiere. It's not until this episode we even see how Carl was bitten, and it means that, despite the emotional core, the death doesn't pack quite the same punch as it would have done being contained to just one installment. Number 5. It really screws the comics. Carl is, unsurprisingly, still alive in the Walking Dead comic books, which is now way ahead of the show. He survived all-out war, is still part of big things after the time jump, and remains heavily involved in the storylines to come involving the Whisperers, which will probably form a big part of The Walking Dead Season 9. The show has deviated from the comics in some big ways before, with Carol's character outliving her graphic novel counterpart, and Andrea having her life cut short by some distance. But this is the biggest change yet. It's not necessarily a terrible thing for them to go their own way in some respects, but since they still tend to hit the major milestones and plot points, it does cast a lot more uncertainty as to where the show is headed, while delivering something akin to a massive F*** you to fans of the comics who want to see those events play out on screen. Number 4. It wastes Carl and Negan's relationship. Despite Jeffrey Dean Morgan's obvious charisma, Negan hasn't translated well to the screen as fans would have hoped, with the villain all too often coming across as being a bit one-note. One of the best aspects of his character then, and one that does give him a bit more depth and Morgan something different to play with, is his strange relationship with Carl. Although on opposing sides of the conflict, Negan has an odd respect that even borders on affection for Rick's son, and it allows him to be something other than a swaggering loudmouth, while giving Carl more to do as well. It gets explored further in the comics, and it would have been fascinating to see on TV. Carl's death means the end of that relationship though, robbing Negan of a great on-screen partner and taking away the chance to deepen their relationship and add more layers to both characters in the process. Number 3. It invalidates Rick's arc. The Walking Dead has always been framed around Rick Grimes' fight for survival, but right there with him is his son Carl. Rick's fought to protect his son's life on more than one occasion, and while Judith added to that too, the bond between the father and son was one of the most developed relationships on the show, and more or less Rick's entire reason to exist. We went through that for 8 years of close calls, struggles, drama, and eventually got to a place where there's a chance of making a better world. and then Carl just dies. Obviously, The Walking Dead tends to be an incredibly nihilistic series, flipping between its twin themes of hope and despair. But killing off Carl at this juncture makes it harder to see what the point was of all these struggles before it. Number 2. There's nothing to fight for. Like with Rick's past, Carl's death leads to serious question marks over what he's now fighting for. The war against Negan was all about moving from simply surviving to actually thriving, attempting to carve out a new world for the next generation to enjoy. That can still happen to an extent, but it's much harder to buy Rick's motivations without Carl there to drive him on. Sure, there's still Judith and Maggie's unborn child, but the show will need to age them up a fair bit to make that more plausible and turn them into actual characters. Carl's presence gave us a more concrete reason for Rick's decision to engage in a war against Negan and the Saviors, and serves a similar purpose in the wars to come too. They can still fight for his memory, but it's not as strong a tether as having him around, appearing in scenes with Rick and showing their conflicts and compassion. Number 1. There's no future. As much as The Walking Dead was and is Rick's story, it was also Carl's. While the character was annoying at times and Chandler Riggs' performance wasn't always the best, it was tolerable because he was so clearly important to the show. Whenever theories about the end of the show did come up, Carl was typically at the center of them. He was the next generation, and whether that involved Rick sacrificing himself to save him, or Carl picking up the torch and leading the next band of survivors, or helping to forge a new world that's actually safe, Carl was always seen as the future of not just the show, but whatever came after the show, whether told on screen, on the page, or left up to the viewer's imagination. Now, with the show still spinning its wheels in all-out war and no real end on the horizon, it's harder than ever to see the future of the show. Maybe the time jump will help with that, but it would have been even easier by, just having Carl stick around.
Gosh, can you believe that person said that about that particular video on that entry? I sure can't. But you should like, share and subscribe below anyway. And also, the people who made this video, they're right here. Go follow them and give them some love. Also, there's more content, probably above my head. Check it out. Or don't. 50-50.